Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 155. I'm Steve Smith. We're coming to you from Wintergreen, Virginia. Beautiful resort up in the mountains. Great guest tonight. Let me just say 9 syllables to 2. Tennis teaching pro living in Columbus, Ohio. He's from Athens, Greece. And we'll let him tell the story how we got connected. Never met him in person, but it's going to be fun. Certainly know him via the internet, like so many relationships today. Looking for his phone number. Constantinos Alevizopoulos.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for being a guest on our podcast. This is going to be great. Let me pronounce your name and then you try it. See who wins this competition. We'll go first name. Constantinos. Your turn.
Good. My name, you mean pronounce my own name?
Yeah, first name, yeah.
Yeah. Constantinos.
Okay, this next one, I think there's a little difference between the first and your go and my go, but Alevizopoulos.
Alevizopoulos.
Okay, so now put it all together.
Constantinos Alevizopoulos. It's 25 letters. So
yeah, as I was saying earlier, 9 syllables to 2. Steve Smith.
Yeah.
Let's tell our listeners. First of all, you're in Columbus. You're teaching pro. Came over to the U.S. to play college tennis. But tell us how we met via the internet. Go ahead. Tell the listeners that story.
Yeah, no, a small world, especially the tennis world. One of my good friends and students sent you a video of his daughter playing, who's aspiring to play in college, and when you gave the analysis, he said, "Give it a look and tell me what you think." So I checked it out, and I think I told him something along the lines of, he's kind of like the Yoda of tennis. I was very impressed, and we started talking, and he said, you should check out his content on YouTube. And then he also said, you guys say some similar stuff or some basic checkpoints. So I looked it up and, I started remembering some stuff slowly. I got hooked on your content immediately. And then, until then I was just teaching through experience, some other stuff I learned through the years from others, and primarily how I was taught from my coach. And, I'm lucky I have a good memory. And I remember was always a very quiet but curious guy, and I asked my coach when I was around 15, 16 how he was taught, how he learned how to teach, and he said kind of through experience. And there was a guy in California, he said, he said he looked up his videos, and that's kind of how he took those basic principles and started teaching. And he hasn't really he never tried to reinvent the wheel, and it definitely worked. And so after that, I think I reached out saying, I think about a year ago, and said, thank you for the content, etc. And the rest is history. I think I sent you an email about a couple weeks ago, and we got in touch again.
Yeah, the first sentence on this, right at the top, actually, not the first sentence, but we talked almost a year and a half ago, and I appreciate you taking time to study our content. I think I hesitate in saying our content because basically what we've done is we've studied many, many different tennis teachers, and it's not, in that sense, it's not our country or our content. I would say perhaps it's our homework with But very intrigued. I mean, the gentleman you're referring to, how do you pronounce the coach's name? Georgios?
His name is Giorgos, which the English American version would be George Fountoukos.
Yeah, from your letter, and you're referring to Stefanos Tsitsipas, as we're going to talk so much about him this evening, a world-class tennis player, one of the best in the world. And I'm always intrigued. I do think throughout the tennis industry, many tennis teachers, tennis coaches are very pretentious. Not many people have been around, someone in their early years. I think of someone who I did not coach, but I think of Robbie Seguzo, who became number one in the world for 5 years in doubles, and he was 21 in the world in singles. And one mentor of many, Welby Van Horn, he's always asking people, how do you develop a tennis mind? And then also too is how do you develop a tennis player? But let me read this about your coach. The person who taught us how to play, we both owe him a lot. He was a great coach to develop more Greek champions than anyone I know. I asked him one day how he learned how to teach. He replied, I bought some videotapes. This funny, chubby guy from California and never tried, as you mentioned, to reinvent the wheel. He was very big on technique and gave an emphasis on playing beautiful tennis. He really looked up to Roger Federer. This is your coach, Stefanos' coach. But I feel his idol growing up was Stefan Edberg. Your coach, you go on. He gave us the option to choose between hitting a one-handed backhand or a two-handed backhand. It was completely up to us. And going on here, one sentence from your email about Stefanos. From a very young age, he stood out like a fly in milk. Tell us a little bit about that going back. So you were with him, but from the ages of, for his age, 9 to 14. Why don't you just try to paint a picture for us on what it was like?
Yeah, well, I want to make clear, I was not one of my, many people ask me what happened to you after I tell them that I was actually Stefanos' hitting partner. Unfortunately, we didn't have the same skills, but basically, long story short, we happened to live in the same area, and we both kind of started playing at the same time. I'm almost exactly 4 years older than him. I got not old, but fairly older than other kids into the sport. I loved soccer growing up, and it took me a while to get into tennis. And I really struggled just keeping up with other kids of my age. So what they would do is they would put me with kids that were younger a lot. And the opposite happened to Stefanos slowly. He just outgrew the kids of his own age. So we matched up very well. I was, fairly stubborn, and I could make a lot of balls, and I could muscle the ball back. And I just kind of became his breathing backboard. That's all I was.
Well, one thing for our listeners, we're starting this podcast at 9:30 p.m. Today you taught 9 hours, and tomorrow you're back at it at 6:30 in the morning. So you definitely have passion. With tell us a little bit. I certainly read, and I think the tennis world, once someone gets to become world class, especially at the very, very top, it's almost like they're under a microscope, and there's so much to read about players. But with his background, his grandfather was on the Soviet Union gold-winning team, 1956 Olympics, as we would say, a soccer player. And then his mother and father. I have some notes in here. It's the mother is very quickly born in 1964, graduate from Moscow University. She did represent the Soviet Union, winning record in Fed Cup, which is now the Billie Jean King Cup. Has a win over Virginia Wade, who was a 77 Wimbledon champion. She was ranked 194 in singles, 130 in doubles. With, and the grandfather, her father, he continued in soccer as a manager of the FC Spartak Moscow team. But then the father, how do you pronounce his father's first name?
Apostolos.
I love these Greek names.
Yeah.
Growing up, played soccer and basketball. Briefly was a member of the national soccer team. But started playing tennis seriously at a late age. Played tournaments. Became good, but not high enough to earn an ATP level. But he studied sports science at the university.
Correct.
And then along with his wife, they both became teaching pros. There's so many things that, you mentioned to me in a couple of conversations, but one where the dad's 40 years old, they're at the track and he's doing backflips. So he certainly, Stefanos was brought up by athletes.
For sure. I still remember that day. It was just, I was myself, very passionate as a teenager about getting better in the sport. And obviously Stefanos was. And my brother also played. And so I remember a couple of times the father just asked, we're doing some agilities at the track. It was a soccer field and around there's a track. And my mother drove us there. And I don't know how it came up, but he just said, I used to have to do backflips to pass this test in the sports science in the university. My mother kind of giggled. And she said, okay, well, let us, why don't you just show off? And he literally started doing like flip, I don't know how you call them, somersaults, flips, one after the other. And it was really impressive. But talking about his background, I mean, came from a very athletic parents. And even as a kid, even now, he was always built more like a decathlete. I mean, that's the best way to describe him. He was just, tall, lean, and but I would say fairly well rounded. He didn't have one skill more developed than other. I think that he reminded me of like a decathlete. So yeah, but definitely, I mean, he had the gene in him. And like I said, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, decathlete, we do these exercises from the baseline. We do the animal kingdom, and one is the frog jump. And one time, the gentleman was 6'10". He was a physical trainer from Japan who came to spend, 4 or 5 weeks with us. And he could actually get up to the net, and it's, 39 feet. He'd get up there in 3 jumps. But that's a great compliment for the young listeners and decathletes, someone who they do 10 different events as they compete in the Olympics and other events. But go ahead.
No, and the expression he stood out like a fly in milk is a Greek expression, so I hope it made sense. But he never came out of the blue. He always was very impressive. And, I was a kid of the club. I always would hang out, whether I was playing or not, with my father and my brother at the club. And everyone would talk about him, all the members, all the kind of coaches. He was always, impressive. And another thing I think a lot about is, it wasn't only that he improved, the rate at what he was improving was very fast. So I would take one step, he would take 5 steps in the same period. And then he never plateaued. He just, go ahead.
And I once heard someone say about Roger Federer is, actually, it was his childhood coach, his first coach, who said that you just had to show him one time, and he was pretty much so he was gifted. But the work ethic, Let me read continuing here. from your email. Not making the final of a tournament was bad, and it was very rare that he did not make the final. And then heard you, it's not in your letter, but I heard you talk about how he would cry after losing at a really young age and go hide in the parking lot. And I remember meeting Jim Courier's sister, Audra, and she said the first time he lost, he cried for 3 days in a row. But reading from your email, not making a final of a tournament. Okay, I'll go on. To this day, I've never seen someone come back so many times. 0-5, 1-5, 2-5. He always found a solution to win and knew how to play when the money was on the table. Actually, there's a scene, it's on YouTube, and it's at the Laver Cup, and Federer's talking about Tsitsipas and said he loves the stage. He's a big time performer. He's going to do great. And they were just talking about an upcoming match. Go ahead.
No, please. Sorry.
Yeah, I just the letter. He could play every shot, every style. I, unfortunately, as you mentioned, personally was a pusher. And that was the only way I knew how to win. Most players, and I did look at photos of the club. You could tell us about the club. Most players were good from the baseline. But at the age of 10, he literally had every shot. He could apply it under pressure. He could play combos such as hit a drop shot as return to serve, lob, come in, serve and volley, and do it on the most crucial points. First serve, second serve. But it seemed to always work. His father, one of the biggest influences on him, believed you should play as offensive as possible. In other words, always go for it and make your opponent have to thread the needle. By the age of 12, he could beat the best club players teaching pros in Athens. By the age of 14, he struggled finding competition in the country. Go ahead from there.
No, I mean, and again, those things are all pretty accurate. He really, he would always find a solution to win. I mean, he would lose, but semifinals, finals. I mean, I don't really remember him losing before that, and obviously would win most tournaments. But he was always up there in the top, 3 or 4. And the impressive thing we always used to say, me and my father, he could come back from the craziest scores. Looking back at it, I think he has for sure the mental skills, but I think he was just way more confident than all of us. He just had so many skills, and it was like tools in his pocket. But back to kind of, again, the progression. Yeah, by the age of 10, he could probably demonstrate most shots, most skills, most strokes. And by the age of 12, I mean, he really would play against the better club players and beat them. And then 14, 15, he had, I think, we left at the same time. I left for the States, and he started traveling the world on a year-round basis. But it was just very impressive. Just his skills were. He was very talented. That's my point.
Well, I think in many ways, talent is just another word for hard work. I mean, certainly some people have a gift. Or some people have a little bit more of an edge, but really in the end to become world-class, so there's no secret. I mean, you just have to have such a work ethic. I want to just mention one point that I love from your email, aesthetic tennis. We share often a Virginia Wade quote, winning tennis doesn't lead to beautiful tennis, but beautiful tennis leads to winning tennis. So it was the idea of having long-term vision. Then the father sounds very much like, and of course, you can't rule out with the mom with her background as well, is to play big boy tennis. I mean, we call it to play pro style tennis, not play push or junior defensive tennis. But one thing with Braden, and we're trying to carry the torch for many tennis teachers from the past, but I think when we use Vic's name, he'd be the first one to say, well, it's not the Vic Braden method. Galileo and Newton were here a long time before us, but facts and science and logic and terms. There's actually in a book on Novak Djokovic, where his childhood coach, page 17, I think the author is Chris Bowers, says in particular using Vic Braden's books to learn how to play. Come back to the work ethic. He played other sports. I know he was a swimmer. He played table tennis. And I think you could even talk about football in your country. Everybody plays football.
Yeah, no, tennis was a priority to him and the family from a very young age, and he was always on the court. I mean, win or lose, they were always spending time again with his father too, with his siblings. He has a younger brother. He has 3 siblings, but he's used to with his younger brother, and always playing against anyone he could find, club players. I think he played some sports for sure at a young age. I know soccer, but sooner or later, tennis kind of became his main focus. And in Greece, and my mother was Dutch, so in most countries in Europe, soccer is if you're a boy, you will kick a ball. So it's kind of goes along with going to school. You'll probably kick a ball somewhere, and it's just the biggest sport for sure in Greece, and the Netherlands. It's almost like a religion.
One thing with running. On YouTube, you could do this with so many players. Actually, I'm having a few players right now look at these workouts online. I would recommend not to look at videos on how to hit a tennis ball online. I just think there's certainly way, way more bad than good. But as far as the fitness, to watch the drills, for example, the fitness workouts of Swiatek, unbelievable. But whether it's a track, hurdles, rope, cords, pool, a ladder, a tennis ladder, the beach, the weights. It just seems like, he was always working on a track. He was always working on running. Is that true from a very young age?
Yeah, no, even his build was, again, like I told you, he always had long, like a very lean, tall, like a long distance runner almost, decathlete kind of. But no, his father taught at tennis courts next to a track and a soccer field. And he was always working. And but a lot, to be honest, on the court, it was a lot of tennis skills that he did, and there's always working on skills. He just had, you can't get to that level only with talent. So, and always active. He wasn't, a gamer or anything like that. He was always moving. The
first time I watched him play, I was with a friend, Matt Clore, at the US Open, and at that time I believe he was a national coach with the USTA at that time. It may have gone back even when he was a college coach. He might have been there recruiting, but it was way back when, and I was there, and I have to think about when it was. I'm going to guess that the person I was with is 32 now, and they were 18. So it was many, many years ago. But anyway, Tsitsipas is only 24, right?
So actually, no, he'll be 25 in August.
25 in August. So anyway, Matt and I went off. We said, hey, we got to go watch this guy. And I just remember that, he had great movement. He could run.
Yes.
I like the idea that when you want to do tennis specific drills, and certainly you can do off-court training, but I like the idea that where it's a sprint, there's all sorts of movements that demand agility, but at the end, you're hitting a tennis ball. You can, um, you know, going way back to the John Newcomb tennis camp, you can hang on to easily 12 tennis balls. You're tossing balls with your right hand if you're right-handed. You hang on to balls in your left hand, then you have some in your arm, and now you can even have the bag over your shoulder. But you just start like feeding breadcrumbs to a pigeon. You just start tossing balls, and kids go out and run the spider drill where they're changing directions, and that's great to do. But also to do that with a racket in your hand, and everything is just like a scramble. With the commitment, though, he decided at age 9. He woke his father up like at 3 a.m. and he told his dad, "I want to be a tennis pro." But from your email, his idols growing up didn't have two-handed backhands. The guy likes Federer and Sampras, but then he also liked players like Feliciano Lopez and Philip Kohlschreiber. I remember being in Indian Wells. There's so much tennis to watch, and I was in the Players Lounge. I shouldn't say the Players Lounge, not the area where it's so large and it's a big cafeteria, but just the lounge in the men's locker room, and it was an old match of Agassi and Sampras, and I've learned a long time ago is a lot of times you just leave the famous alone, just give him a little space. But I sat in there with Kohlschreiber, and he didn't take his eyes off of that. So anyway, I'm at Indian Wells. There's lots of tennis to watch, and it's an off day with the player you're with, that I was with, and it's like I was in the locker room. So I'll just sit here and watch this. Amazing. Go ahead.
No, I mean that's true. He liked players with one-handed backhand, and he was almost. I know in soccer we say this like a virtuoso. He liked players that played pretty tennis, and our coach was the same way. He really emphasized playing like I don't know if that term exists in the orthodox tennis, and he liked again Sampras, Federer, and the commitment was there from a young age. He really, I think himself, told himself that it was kind of the route he wanted to follow, being a professional tennis player. But it was gung ho. I mean, he had the skills, but at the same time, it's so freaking hard, the chances of making it, but he went full on and never looked back.
It was all red clay courts, all outdoor, correct? How many courts?
So it was 4. It was 5 clay courts. Yes.
And
orange clay. Yeah.
Did his parents teach at the same club?
No, his father taught, as I think I told you, basically it was a athletic club nearby with a soccer field with a track, some basketball fields, and some tennis courts, and that's where his father taught.
So his father was actually a high school educator then.
Yes, he was a high school educator as well. And he taught on the side too, and was a very good player and very good coach. But we practiced, me and him and several other kids, kind of that same age, practice with Giorgos Fountoukos at the facilities. You see the 5 clay courts.
I think in my library I have close to 700 books. Just sometimes the title alone is a statement. One book I have, it's not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. So obviously Tsitsipas and his whole family, long-term vision. But for those of you who are familiar with Vic Braden's work, you definitely can see the influence. You definitely can see how, it's not just with the one-handed backhand, but the all-court style. And I mean, the grips, you definitely can see the influence from Braden.
No, he for sure. I mean, some things. It's hard to remember how you were taught, and that's how it came. You came more to my attention as I was watching, and I looked up some of the courses you have online. Some similar checkpoints that my coach taught. Is and yeah, it. Sorry, I got lost. I was gonna say, but yeah, he basically taught the all around game. Trying to play aggressive, come to the net, and yeah. I mean, but another thing I want to emphasize is he really taught an orthodox game. None of his players, whether they accomplished a lot or not, they didn't look awkward. That was a big thing. You could almost tell his players by the way they played, whether they were, winning tournaments or not. They just looked. They didn't have hinges. They didn't have. They didn't look unorthodox. That's my point.
No, that's very good. I think another point you made, it is very difficult to remember how you're taught. And I certainly am repetitive, trying to pound home some principles, pound home some points. Our podcast it's really not a magazine where we're, interviewing players, famous players, or coaches of famous players. Although, we certainly have interviewed a wide spectrum of people, but so instead of being a magazine and say we're more of a book, I mean, with Lynette Federer and everyone who listens, and I appreciate you listening to our podcast, people who listen to our podcast, if you want to know how Roger Federer played when he was 8, you would ask either Robert or Lynette. And it's Adolf Kavoski, they called him Seppi, that paraphrasing, his lessons were Roger Federer. He was 8 years old, standing in one place for the entire hour on balance with long follow throughs. And, something that's really gone away in tennis teaching, especially in this country, is static balance. Welby Van Horn, I mean, he would go, if we've talked about in our podcast, as many as 3 lessons where kids weren't even hitting a tennis ball, showing them body balance and grips and shape of swings and how to practice in front of a mirror. And I think we've gone entirely the other way. Go ahead.
I remember. I mean, some things I cannot forget. But the concept of the long hitting zone, that was drilled into our head or my head. I remember it, and he was a fan of Federer. So, how Federer really almost has that. But poetic, he looks like he's doing ballet, or the way he would almost extends to his target. He really tried to teach us that. And I would say another thing is no one who was taught from the start through my coach had weird or awkward grips. We all had, those basic checkpoints, but I remember, yes, the unit turn, no, we didn't have awkward grips, the hitting zone. We didn't really play any games, to be honest. It was more focused on technique, the application of the technique. I remember when I began, we did a lot of mini tennis. This kind of describe it on the side. We would tie I remember it was a red rope that would come vertical to the net. So you would basically make many mini tennis courts, and we would almost play up and down the river with multiple mini tennis courts. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So we would do that a lot, especially in the beginning. And then a lot of match play slowly. I played a lot of sets with him, a lot of sets with other club players. and then a lot of tournaments in the area. He played all the tournaments. He didn't look. He played all the local tournaments to begin with, and he just was out of competition slowly. But he didn't snob tournaments at all. But a lot of match play. So I feel I'm going in a loop. But it wasn't some sort of a what do you want to say? Rocket science followed. Some technique, working hard, and then a lot of practice and matches, tournaments. Yeah, it wasn't reinventing the wheel for sure.
With mini tennis, up here in the mountains with a longtime friend, Steve Campbell, and he's the tennis director. But the facility has a total of 19 courts, 3 indoor and 16 clay courts. Now, it was built obviously in the 70s when there was a tennis boom in this country. And they also now have 8 paddle courts, or no, it's not 8 paddle, 8 pickleball. But with that, I can remember, just copying Dennis Vandermeer, is we would have 2 mini tennis nets, about the size of a pickleball net. You see the portable pickleball nets. We'd have 2 for each side, so we'd have 4 per court. So players could hit east and west. And, just today, and it's on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, we have 5 different types of mini tennis. We actually have more than that. We start adding mini tennis with a soccer ball, mini tennis with a tennis ball as soccer, mini tennis with a medicine ball. We even do mini tennis 5. It's where you do a double hit, but we sometimes say, okay, we'll call it the Hollywood twist, and you can have a third hit, and that's where the kids try to hit the emergency shot behind them, and the boys especially, they have fun trying to play the tweener. But the thing is having people hit the ball. They can't hit the ball hard. And actually, when people play mini tennis for Americans, when you watch red clay quarters, play mini tennis, it looks really, let me say it so I don't use the word really real. It just looks like real tennis. We always said Roger Federer makes it look like he's playing mini tennis on a full court, but that soft touch tennis, because that way, like today I had 2 young boys play tennis baseball, or one's you're the human ball machine. You just catch it and throw it back, deep. And, 2 13-year-olds, and it was 6-0 for one, and then they switched. The baseball player wins 6-0 because they're much more accurate with their hand, and they're working on the throwing motion, and you're teaching consistency. But they're both at a level where if we just had them go play, it wouldn't be very good. I mean, it wouldn't be competitive, wouldn't be athletic, they wouldn't be hitting too many tennis balls. But mini tennis, we had both those boys play mini tennis. Especially with the rackets today. But he started at a very young age as a one-hander, so that's interesting with your coach. He didn't have to convert like most players.
No, and he wasn't. There were several kids that I grew up with in the same group, and most of us had 2 hands, but I can name some other kids one-handed backhands. I want to say a couple of things I always forget. We played a lot of mini tennis. I remember we used to gather. Okay, this is weird, but we would gather at each other's houses, and we would make a tennis court in the living room and play tennis in the living room. I know if you cannot see it, but it's hard to imagine. But we used to do that, and it was a lot of fun.
But in Athens, your weather is good enough to play year round, correct?
It is, but we would just gather, at someone's house, to hang out, for example, and I remember we could put like a mini tennis net, and then we would move the furniture, and we could play in almost the living room. We would basically hung out at someone's house and we could just play in the living room mini tennis. That's how we would, I guess, hang out. I remember doing that. I'm sorry to refer, but I just remember that. The other thing that I haven't seen here in the States yet is, so usually organized practices were about an hour and a half. And especially if you were in the novice group, you would spend the last 15 or 20 minutes playing soccer on the tennis court. So you would do the first hour or give or take working on tennis. And then the last 15, 20 minutes, the coach would put cones on the tennis court and bring almost like a handball, and we would play soccer. And that was the end of the practice. And usually the coach had to play in soccer. That happened too. But that's another thing that we used to do a lot too, is and especially at the beginners level, as we were, learning the sport more. But anyway, I get off tangents. So
no, let's go back. Let's go back to the living room, and then I'll mention soccer. With growing up playing ice hockey, and actually, there's a song about this. It's floor hockey, knee hockey, broom hockey. It's street hockey. It just goes on and on. There's so many different ways to play hockey, which just is another way to define passion. With soccer on a tennis court, I want to go back to our podcast coach Ilya from Latvia. One-on-one soccer on half a court, 2-on-2, which it's a lot of fun. The other day on the court, a game called Lightning Bulb. That's on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied. It's basically ultimate frisbee with a tennis ball. But for our listeners who are coaching, we're working on technique, and it's just a great way. Okay, let's have some fun. It's very athletic, and it's a great physical workout. Initially people have to be taught how to make it most effective. Where once somebody scores what we call a touchdown, you immediately kick off, and there's just no standing around. But with it's interesting. They say in his country, the experts of soccer, that American kids don't really play pickup soccer. But where you grew up, it's instant game everywhere, right?
Oh, my first love was soccer, and I still love it. Tennis now comes first, but if you were talking to my my father, he would tell you. And I remember I would just call other kids in my neighborhood, and that was the best thing. Like, call kids in my neighborhood, hey, let's go play out at the park soccer. Or I would take a ball. It's hard to find green like grass in Greece, but I knew this area, and I remember I would just take my ball and ask other people, kids, you guys want to play soccer with me? But no, that's basically telling my story. But it's a big thing, and I haven't been back in many years. But growing up, so a lot of pickup soccer, and recess. Boys would always play soccer. It doesn't. I'm not talking about high level, but it's just a pastime.
With soccer, I've had so much fun over the years where there could be, say, pick a random number. We have 17 players. 5 are, either European or South American, and I say, okay, all the South Americans, Europeans go down to that end, and it's 5 against 12. Obviously, especially with the women. And we're very fortunate with all the foreign players that come over here, not only play college tennis, but to play college soccer. And we have all sorts of, in both, we have all sorts of international coaches in really all sports. But it's interesting when you hear people from Europe and South America. Soccer is relatively a new sport in this country. When I was a kid, soccer was only played in a couple of small pockets. It was played in the St. Louis area. It was played in the Boston area. But it really, it certainly wasn't played in upstate New York where I grew up. When I was a kid, there was just no soccer.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
What about his junior career? I think when he was in the 18s, I just wrote this down. I didn't look it up, but wasn't he in the finals of 2 Orange Bowls back to back, 2014, 2015? So obviously you followed his tennis, so you went your separate ways where you went off to college, and then I guess we can talk too about the sacrifice of the family with money and such. But before we do that, let's go back to that question on the Orange Bowl. He did he do well right away in international tennis?
So, yeah, I mean, so I followed his progress more up until the age of 14, 15, because we were both living in Greece. But he always, along with the Greek national tournaments, he also played what we call, I think, the European Tennis. I forget the acronym. Association.
Yeah, ETA. So Tennis Europe. It is actually Tennis Europe.
Tennis Europe. Yes, he played those and always did well. He would have tough losses there. The competition was better, but he always, he did fairly well. And then I would say about the same time I came to the States and he started basically traveling year round. I didn't really follow his development, but I remember, he won. I think he went to the Orange Bowl very well, and I know he won Wimbledon in doubles. I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So no, I mean, as I told you, he always did well. Obviously, tennis, always progressed. I'm sure he had rough patches, but I think that's an important thing to note. He never really plateaued. He just kept improving and winning.
I think with Junior Wimbledon, I have it in my notes. Our fact checker can pick on me if it's wrong, but that's accurate that he won the doubles. Also, going back to a previous podcast, Jim Rogers, I know people are busy and can't listen to all the podcasts, but where Denis Shapovalov's mother, they had worked together for years. And, Denis basically was at a club that used our curriculum from the age of 3 to 13. But when he was in the quarters, I think it was, and they were picking their mail up, and Jimmy told Tessa, hey, you should go to Europe. And she said, it's just a junior tournament. But I want to say this about Tennis Europe. I'm always telling American parents their kids are pretty good players, that they should not spend so much money traveling around the U.S. playing, and they should go to Europe. Definitely say their last year 14s. It's not that much more expensive than just traveling all over the U.S. The U.S. is such a big country. But the level of tennis is so impressive. And there's to my knowledge, as it's changed, there's three tiers, but even the lowest, the third tier tournaments are very good. I mean, I think that's one thing too, is that every match on a red clay court, you got to keep a lot of balls in play, where you can pretty much you can be slap happy on a hard court. There's a lot of quick, fast matches in the, like say, a 14 and under hard court tournament. But yeah, Tennis Europe. With the finances, I read where the mother's a twin and her sister helped out. And I was wrong going back. I thought that he went to Patrick Mortagolo's place earlier, but what I read here recently was that he didn't go, as you said, till he was 14. But the family certainly, they really sacrificed as far as putting in the time, the money, the attention for him to become a pro player.
No, and you need to give him and the family a lot of credit. They really, they really sacrificed for him, and their time, their money, their energy. I mean, it is a very cool story to hear how they basically put everything on the line, and it's cool that he's doing so well, but no doubt about it. I mean, we talked about, how the kind of the paradox of choices. It always felt to me as an outsider that making it in tennis was, kind of a priority. And but instead of, let's say, most people, maybe they have more interest or no more interest, kind of an alternatives. They really, basically going in circles, sacrificed everything and traveling around, taking time from school, everything. So, it's a very cool story.
Austin Krajicek with his father, Rob, we've had both of them at different times as guests, and Austin's number one in the world in doubles, which is a feat in itself. Obviously, singles get so much more recognition, but not too many tennis parents, or I could say that perhaps some tennis parents, the father perhaps, maybe the mother too, they played quite a bit of golf, but if their kid gets into tennis, it's like there's no time for golf anymore. I know some people have to do it from a business standpoint, but golf, how's it go? Mark Twain, a good walk ruined. Golf is a 4-letter word. Pick on the golfers. I'm always telling tennis players they should have a golfer's mentality, though. But with the sacrifice for all parties to it's just not simple. That being an individual sport. Go ahead.
It was for sure a collect. I mean, obviously Stefanos was the guy, but who played. But it was for sure a collective effort, the entire family, and it was almost like a team. And props to them. I mean, I'm very happy, extremely happy how he's doing, and it's not easy, as you know, and it's so hard, and I cannot sometimes believe, that he's doing so well. Anyway, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about his personality. You said that very shy, very introverted when he was younger.
Yeah, I mean, I was very shy. I was very quiet, very stubborn. But I wouldn't say, and I would say he was fairly quiet too. This is from my perspective, kind of like a creative and almost like a dreamer. He could kind of look up to the sky and get lost in his own thoughts. But I think we got along for that too. He wasn't a very loud kid, kept to himself. Very creative too on the tennis court and off the court. He had a creative side.
With brain typing, we had a podcast dedicated to that off the Myers-Briggs, a mother-daughter who in the 50s put together a personality test with John Niednagel, did so much research in studying athletes from the past and currently. Arguably, the best tennis players in the world have been ISTPs. And it's very interesting for people who are older that McEnroe and Edberg have the same brain type. So it certainly doesn't put someone in a box. It's just a system for people to understand themselves better, or their teammate. It's a great tool for coaches. But with Stefano, introverted or extroverted? Let me just ask you that question.
I think he was introverted.
Yeah, and of course now, like a Jimmy Connors versus Pete Sampras. Remember Braden making this point again. That some of the listeners, young people, wouldn't really remember Jimmy Connors, but that he was an introvert and Sampras was an extrovert. People thought, no way. But it's not a matter of, say, being gregarious or outgoing. It's where you get your energy. Do you get your energy from the inside or from the outside? And so that's really misread. But then someone like any top player, say a Connors more so than and Sampras, but they all become, most of them really, I think of Del Potro or Andy Murray, they don't think they're the best speakers, but certainly some are better than others. But, like Jimmy Connors, if you win 109 tournaments, you're going to be a pretty good speaker. But I saw a clip where Stefano was asked if he had media coaching, and he said no. But they do learn to perform. I mean, the tennis court's their stage. But sensate or intuitive, in the moment, is the sensate, which is probably the best. I mean, I always tell my juniors, don't use the word probably. Of the different preferences, if you had to choose one, the intuitives, and I think you're okay if you're intuitive. Roger Federer is an N. The letter I was already used for introvert. Is he more in the moment or more down the road?
Well, I think he's I don't know. That's a tough one.
No. I was just asked the other day. It's very difficult to tell, especially with young children, are they sensate or intuitive? And then people become trained. And then need not go 60-40. It's 60%. There's so many things that it's not 100%. It's with nature versus nurture. Go ahead.
So two things. One, on the introverted side, he was definitely someone I feel who could spend time by himself. On the side, I remember his brother could spend a lot of time hitting against the wall. It was really cool to watch. He would just hit balls after balls against the wall. And Stefanos could for sure spend time by himself. He didn't mind that. That's how it seemed to me.
No, we use that when we're talking to tennis players. The extroverts, they have a tendency to go to the backboard and get bored. They get lonely. They need to go chit-chat. But if they really, really love it, an extrovert can go to the backboard and hit all day. But the sensate, certainly it's interesting that he was trained with long-term vision. He was trained with intuitive thinkers. Okay, you're going to go for it. You're going to play big. Even say someone who's going to play a one-handed backhand, make the choice of playing a one-handed backhand. I would guess that most young kids are doing it because they idolize, years ago, a Rod Laver or, someone like Tsitsipas, Federer, Sampras. But with, I think a good question is a Michael Jordan. There's 2 seconds left on the clock. Michael Jordan's no consequences. He's not even thinking of passing. He's taking the shot. He's going for it. He's not thinking, well, at one point he had the record for missing the most game-winning shots in the NBA. But in that sense, would you say he's an S or an N?
I would say he's an N.
An N.
But again, I was around him until I was 14. But he did for sure, had the dream, the long-term dream. But, I always felt maybe more intuitive. But again, things, I don't, like you said, it's hard to say. But yeah, sorry, I would say it was an N.
Okay. With N's, N's have a tendency to get ahead of themselves with a score, and N's will choke more.
Sorry. No, didn't choke.
Well, but he could be trained. You can train yourself, and N can be trained to be an S. I mean, that's where you can't get hung up on it like it's they put you in a box. But it's just interesting to go through it. Thinker or feeler?
Oh la la. I think he was a feeler.
Yeah. Now feelers can think and thinkers can feel. Feelers need a really strong support system, but obviously he had that.
I think he was sorry.
Now this comes from his coach, and certainly the influence from the guy from California, the chubby funny guy, with as your coach referred to him as, and Vic Braden used to refer to himself as that. A P or a J, and that's not peanut butter and jelly. P or J, perceiver or judger, and the judger is more structured, and the P is more random, more flexible, more easygoing. So would you say he's a P or a J?
Oh, he was more flexible. He, let me phrase it correctly. He, I mean, yeah, I would say he was more of a P. P or J, right? Is that what?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it's great for the player to be a P and great for the parent to be a J. You know,
No.
in other words, there's structure. This is what we're going to do today.
I would say he was a P. Like he had the flexibility, and he could just naturally almost do stuff very easily. I don't know if that would refer to a P, but he didn't seem, compared to me, I was very inflexible. I couldn't. I just would get into my head and didn't want to change. He was very, on the court, he could learn every skill.
Go ahead.
No, he worked very hard, but compared to, let's say, me, things came way easier to him. He just, whether someone had to show it or not, but he was very flexible. And coming back to the skill aspect, he was flexible in using different tools on the court. I don't know if that makes sense. Like different game styles. He wasn't stuck on one way to play. I don't know if that would go under the P, but yeah.
Here's an example where I really date myself. Stan Smith, who won Wimbledon in '72. Chrissy Everett, I think, first was '74. When Jimmy Connor's a sweetheart, they're engaged at that time. But Stan Smith was a net rusher, and Chris Everett was someone who stayed back. And Need Nagel had them down both as ISTJs. And you can learn to be a serve and volleyer, but again, it's through structure. A lot of times people just randomly. But I think I would guess that someone like Stefanos did it because he had so much passion. His coach was obviously teaching him the skill set to play the ball that way. I mean, Braden's influence, also then, appreciating the artistic side of tennis and liking Edberg. But with that, what happens, why so many young players become baseliners, is not just because they want to win and they're better at the baseline than at the net, is they are a J and they learn that one routine. They learn that one routine and they get locked in. And they get locked in for years. And when you think about somebody playing a certain way from, the 12s to the 14s, and with the personality, working in Columbus, he's obviously spent time in Cincinnati. You guys have got together. What do you see? What traces from his personality do you see as you watch him perform on the world stage, or you get together with him at the Cincinnati tournament?
To be honest, we've lost touch pretty much since we don't communicate on a regular basis at all. Pretty much since I left for the States, and he's on to bigger and better things. But I feel comfortable enough with him, so when he comes to Cincinnati, we'll get together, for a day, to just to see each other. I think what I see from, again, that he's a very normal guy. I think I see the creative side of him too a lot off the court. I think he's not afraid to be himself. But at the end of the day, I think he's a normal guy like everyone else, and I say it in a good way. But I don't feel he has changed that much since he was a kid. I can still, without being around him at all, he seems like the same person. But I see that creative side on the court that he had. I know he's involved in YouTube, I think, and some other stuff. So I can see that side, those things overlapping. But he is the same. Seems like the same guy, and he was just a normal guy that in a very good way. That he's just very good at tennis and very passionate. He was driven as a kid and seems to still be driven to winning. I don't think he's a guy when we were young together, even as a younger kid, he didn't seem to have distractions. He seems the same way now, but I think he wants to be well-rounded in other stuff too, but he still seems to have the same drive to win.
One thing with coming back to Braden, treat the famous like they're not, and the not like they are. Vic used to always say is the tennis player who starts to win, it's not like they change, but all the people around them change. And there's so many groupies and so many agents and so many leeches, merchants of flesh. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that for sure. Again, we've it's not fair for me to say now or the last couple of years, but, I think that's true for sure. Everyone wants to be your friend now that you've made it. And, it's harder to see who really maybe cares about you or not, but, and another thing, coming back to his drive, I always felt he never had really, he would get distracted from other stuff, or sidetracked. He's very determined and, he doesn't strike me as someone who, parties excessively or anything like that. He's, as I said, driven.
All you have to do is watch what he does from a fitness standpoint. There's so many. YouTube is just what is put up on a daily basis. It is just hard to comprehend how much content there is on YouTube. But the inner circle too. Obviously, I'm always saying it's the family that gets the tennis player down the road. Families develop more tennis players than federations, for sure. So much wasted money, especially the majors. Like, just not to pick on the USTA, but where does the money go? How much money has been spent? But the inner circle is so tight with the family, and it's in a lot of ways it's amazing how when you take a back seat, and that's where I think this story is so interesting. Is I've been watching tennis families for so long, and the late Nick Bollettieri, I don't think anyone in the history of the game met more families that were driven to have their children reach their highest level, to live their dream. And but so that passion just continues from what they started at such a young age. Are you familiar with the story where, he grew up? Obviously, this, that going to the beach and swimming and taking swimming lessons and such, where he almost drowned. His father saved his life.
I've heard of that story. Yes. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that what I read was he was a little bit older. He was already, of course, he was, playing pro tournaments. The future is a step up, the ITF 15K, I'm sure they were at that time. But that it taught him perspective, and that he would never face anything tougher than that. And granted, there's, like all tennis players, there's been drama in his matches, but that he said that gave him perspective, and through that, he found as a competitor he could be more calm, more collected, more composed.
Yeah, I've heard that story. but I think he always did on the court. Like I said, and I know maybe there's been events, but when it came to performing, I don't know if he disguised it or not. He could always keep his cool, even as a kid. He reminded me. I don't know which game. Whenever I think of it, was one of Michael Jordan's games. I think it was at the Utah. I don't know. Was it the Utah Jazz? I don't remember. Anyway, and he just is this symbolic play of him, kind of that he had that ice in his veins. So he always didn't really lose his temper. Always had ice in his veins and could come back. But the story I've heard of him with his father, it's crazy. But he's very close. It's a very tight family. I know that for sure. And he's very close with his father. Obviously he works with his father exclusively now as a coach, but they really have a bond. And I think it's more a coach, but also almost like a friend to him on the tour. That's how I see it, that he can just trust no matter what.
Well, I think one thing, again, Braden, every day is not a golden day, and there is drama. I had one son tell me the other day, he was asked by someone, my two boys are only 18 months apart. And my son, who stopped playing tennis at a fairly young age, is the one I was talking to. So he was asked, did you fight a lot? And of course, now he's an adult, he's climbing towards 35. And, he said, well, yeah, of course, all boys, 18 months apart, especially. I think if kids are in birth order, there's 4 or 5 years between them. The relationship generally, there's less fighting. So anyway, what I said was, and I don't like to really come back to the tennis with them, but I have a memory. So I said, well, you only played one set, and he had played the older boy played one set against the younger boy where he lost. He only lost one time. And then what I said, what should have happened is that you should have played a set a day. You should have played one set a day, and it would have been so difficult to deal with. It's like a battle. It's like World War III. It's like the story of Dick Stockton and Brian Gottfried, his teammates, his freshmen at Trinity, where they played a set a day, and they both were in the NCAA finals, and they were both top 10 in the world. Like Jimmy Connors, when he won Wimbledon, he said, this is what I always wanted to do. And back in the day, the parents could be right next to the player during the trophy presentation. And Gloria Connors interrupted, it was on TV, and she said, no, Jimmy, you always wanted to beat your older brother, Johnny. And, actually, if people would go back there years ago, like at Wimbledon, there wasn't even chairs for the players to sit down. Now all these years, or way back when, the matches weren't televised. And it's the Nick Bollettieri rule. Is Nick used to jump on the court and put his arm around his student who won the tournament. I only know of one time is Richard Williams. One time, that rule was broken where he was on the court during a trophy presentation. I think one thing, just to reiterate through our podcast, suitcase tennis. When you say you could always come back, I think this is something that the parents should talk about, the coaches, is you look at a draw sheet and it's like 7-6, 6-0, 7-5, 6-1. It's amazing how that first set's very competitive. And a lot of people, they go on the walkabout and they're not focused. I've been told recently by half dozen people I need to watch the documentary, The Quarterback. And so I have two players here that are visiting me, and they've been taught to hit the ball really well. Their coach has done a great job. Two brothers, 13, 15, they hit the ball really well, but they're just not around jockocracy. So they loved watching this documentary on the NFL quarterbacks. But I think also to parents listening is that with Stefanos Tsitsipas, Stefanos, two athletes who became two coaches. And that doesn't mean that if the parents are not, are you still there?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I thought I lost you. So we had a little problem with sound, but no problem. That if tennis parents are not former athletes and they're not coaches, they still can be great, but they need to really understand what type of commitment it takes. And just to try to become the best you can be. It's not a matter of getting ahead of yourself. Obviously, Tsitsipas is trying to be the best 10-year-old he could be. What about the family with siblings? The brother, they play a lot of doubles. I mean, that's something too that you can think you could commend the family for that.
No, I mean, he has three siblings. The youngest is his sister, who really was too young to play when I was there, and his youngest brother was fairly young too. But his second, Petros, I remember him, very good tennis player. They used to, I think, as I told you, it's a family thing for them. They all play tennis. They all hang around the club, and he used to play with his father doubles too. It's kind of a family ordeal. His brother is a very good player. Obviously, maybe not good enough as Stefanos, but they play. They're close. They play together, as far as I know. And his father always, I think, I saw him I remember talking to him 2 years ago about this when I saw him in Cincinnati. He really tries to enforce this aggressive style of game. I think the doubles game is just a shorter game. It's like a sprint. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it's almost like I said, it's a family ordeal for them. They all are into tennis and they enjoy it, and it's like
I saw him play doubles recently, Stefanos. I was a little disappointed because before he was forward, but he was serving, staying back a little bit this last time I saw him play. But I think with wild cards, there's been some controversy with that. They're only 2 years apart. 1998, Stefanos was born in 2000, Petros. But obviously, I mean, he's won nine futures titles. So he can play. We know that the futures level is not the ATP, but he's a very good tennis player. I think the positive side, and there has been people complaining about the wild cards issued, rightfully so. I mean, I liked it better when there was no such thing as a wild card. A lot of tournaments in the U.S. and a lot of Americans, the wild cards are fluff. I mean, wild cards, and really in the end, if people make a study of it, players, they don't make it on a wild card. I mean, it's great to Ivan Ivanisevic when he won Wimbledon on a wild card. And it's happened a few times since. Even most recently, the girl from won Wimbledon this year, wasn't she? She got many wild cards because she's coming back from injury. I don't know if her ranking was frozen or not, but
was it a wild card or was she just not seeded? One of the two.
Yeah, no, I think not seeded, but getting back into it.
Yes.
Climbing back up if people don't freeze their ranking and such. But Patrick McEnroe, he got all sorts of wild cards playing with John, and John would say, "Yeah, I'll play your tournament, but bring my brother with me and play the qualies, and he'll be in the doubles." And with but Patrick McEnroe is, I mean, obviously, I think he was 28 in the world and got to the semis of the Australian Open, won a major playing doubles. But he played at Stanford long before he, that's a very good tennis player before he was chipping away at the Pro Tour. Go ahead.
No, I think I'm not trying to defend Stefanos or something, but I think he's a very family oriented guy, and it's one of the, I don't know if he will go outside his way to to help out his family, and it's a tight family, and his brother obviously he's a good player, but he's one of the that's how he always strikes me, as a very it's a very very close family. And another thing about his character, I just am going again back, Stefanos outside the court was not a how do you say, someone who would get into conflict. He was a very someone who outside the court didn't get into conflict. Very wanted to, I don't know if agreeable is the right word, but he wouldn't try to fight or anything. I'm just saying this since we talked about his character. And another always thing that talks to his personality is, I remember we would hang out at the club, and my father would always come in and ask us, "Hey, who wants something to eat, like potato chips or soda to treat?" And he was always a very proud kid. He was always saying no. Not that I think he didn't appreciate the offer, but it was like, he was a very proud guy. Well, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
but I still remember that. Very proud, very, he respected the offer, but he was he would never accept almost help in a good way. He just felt, but I remember that. And he would always say, "No, thank you, I'm fine." Anyway, it's just something that stuck always with me about him.
Well, a couple of things on that. He certainly comes across, interviews and, stories that are filmed. And obviously it's very easy to get an opinion, perhaps. He comes across like he really loves life, but flexibility, his ability to touch his toes, that's not an opinion. In nutrition, he's always talking about nutrition, and he does when he's interviewed, talks about longevity. I think the word proud. My old man used to say, "Make the family proud," but it's interesting. To have pride, the individual, like say for example, in the 12 steps of AA, someone unfortunately becomes an alcoholic. And once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's referred to as a lifetime disease, and you never overcome it. And then when you go to an AA meeting, and I think people be fortunate enough to be in an AA meeting. And fortunately to be in the meeting, but unfortunately I've had many students that have become alcoholics, and the speaker is an alcoholic, and they start, for those of you who haven't listened to a presentation, AA meeting, say the person's name is Jack. I think a person starts off and says, "Hi, I'm Jack," and everybody else goes, "Hi, Jack." And then he goes, "I'm Jack, I'm an alcoholic." And then they tell their story. So with that, you're told as a recovering alcoholic never to be proud. Like, I haven't had a drink in 3 weeks. But here's the expression, if I'm making any sense, is you tell your tennis players, have pride, but don't be proud. It's very interesting. You win that trophy and have pride in what you did to get to that winner's circle, but you're not proud. you just go back to work. I've had a lot of students become Ivy Leaguers and play Ivy League tennis, and I'm forever telling them is once they are accepted is it's okay to be elite. It's great to be elite, but don't be an elitist. I know when we spoke, he was Stefanos Tsitsipas. He was up one set to Chris Eubanks, and we exchanged text messages. And you said, "Well, I hope you didn't jinx him." And did you? I know you're very busy, but did you have a chance to watch that match?
I did not. No, I did not. I actually, when I saw your message, and I remember you texted me early around 8 or so, and I was about to go on the court, and I didn't get to see it. I watched highlights. Yeah, that was a tough loss for him, but yeah,
that's it's interesting in tennis where you can have a direct contact or indirect contact. I would say a direct contact, like yourself. In Stefanos' formative years, from age 9 to 14, which are very important, you had direct contact. Like say Kevin King, who played at Georgia Tech, a world-class human being. A little bit, he played some doubles with my son. I remember doing video work with him. I spent time with Kevin King, so I would say that would be direct. I know one of my close friends has spent quite a bit of time on court with Chris Eubanks. So to me, that would be indirect, where you're getting some information, getting some insights. With Jimmy Rogers on a podcast a couple of weeks ago said that we're outcasts because of the way we look at things. By no means would I would ever want to come across like I'm criticizing Chris Eubanks. Great for him, great for the game. It was at 5 matches, because Wimbledon is 7. Agassi, the year Agassi won it, 321 winners. Eubanks in 4 matches, getting out to the quarters, broke the record 322. But yet there was a lot of floaters, a lot of balls up there like a wounded duck that he could have taken out of the air. So when we say that, we don't say that, okay, Chris Eubanks could have done that, but just from a learning standpoint, because are you going to teach someone to be 6'7"? Andy Roddick, you can't teach 6'7", the way he was serving. And then also too, on the backhand volley, I had, in my world, I'm getting text messages from quite a few teaching pros that are watching that and going, gee, if somebody could help him with his backhand volley. He's actually running around his backhand volley and then jamming himself to hitting a forehand volley. And, I do think, hey, you have to take your hat off to Chris Eubanks is in for the rest of his life. He's in the last 8. He's in that. They have a special club on the grounds of Wimbledon for those who've got to the quarters. But let's talk a little bit about Stefanos' game. Does anything come to your mind with details on what you think he could do to be better? Do you look at it like that? I know you're in the trenches and you're out there working with beginners, and some people would say that's a completely different world. That's a billion miles away from, being 3 in the world.
Right. When it comes to his game, you mean, or generally?
Yeah. No, his game.
Yeah. He always, I feel his backhand is definitely more susceptible. He always grew up with a better forehand. His backhand was never, a shot you could go on and win the point off immediately. I just think it just came off with less speed. So, I think he working on his backhand maybe more. Then I know his serve, he seems like he's finishes almost off balance on his serve when he lands. Probably wrong. You probably can see these things better than me, but I think again, I guess I maybe coming to the net more. It's not easy. When I think Djokovic and these guys, their passing shots are so good that the ball comes down and. It's hard to make that low volley, but I think, and this came through you, when you said if you eventually come more often and often, you sooner will put more pressure on the person who's trying to hit the passing shot. So, yeah, I mean, you can always work on your game. I think, yeah, I mean, the backhand side, I think, is just the ball. You need to be able. You got to do something when the ball comes to your left, and maybe running around his backhand a little less. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, we tell people we don't want to tell you what we think. We want to tell you what we know. And using film, certainly. Having said that, tennis is an inexact science because it's played by people. You know, we're forever telling people that you have to understand that you really can misinterpret what you're seeing. And when you look at a forehand on YouTube, it's one forehand. You don't know the tactical situation. You don't know where the opponent is on the other side. You're just looking at one forehand. You know, it's like Alcaraz on the forehand. Well, he opens way up. You know, I just, you know, educated guess is that young man played so much mini tennis when he was young. He's so loose in the shoulder. He lets that racket free fall. And then if you think about Alcaraz coming back to Braden, or just better yet, to say coming back to just fundamentals. I mean, he is so good. And, you know, so he's 20, Tsitsipas is 25. And if you make a checklist, I mean, they're both very, very good players. So they play 10 times. Las Vegas is going to pick Alcaraz to win. They're not going to bet him. They're not going to pick him to win all 10. And again, money, I believe Tsitsipas is close to 30 million. But a few things quickly on his game. His serve, his toss. His toss needs to be more to the right. It looks like he's always searching for his toss. The riddle, does the racket find the toss? Does the toss find the racket? Going back to, you know, serving blindfolded. You know, you should be able to serve with your eyes closed. But the brain is programmed. So we're not saying, okay, Tsitsipas has to change his toss. I mean, you can work within a player's game, but if, you know, you can learn so much from Tsitsipas. I mean, there's so many, he's a great model, you know, not only his competitiveness and his work ethic, you know, how he presents himself, but he's a great model for all court tennis. His front foot, his left foot spins out to the net post. You know, Braden used to say you could lose as much as 30 miles per hour. You know, if people went back and listened to Gideon Ariel, one of our guests, you can see movement, but you can't see forces. You know, as he goes up to the contact point, he wants to maximize his forces. And you know, that's where, like, say, in Andy Roddick, when you see where he was at the hit and how everything's going up at a 45, the body's leaning at a 45-degree angle, lower body, upper body, arm and racket. What's at the end of the power line is a toss, but the body segments are facing at a 45. So I definitely think he could improve his serve with same thing. I mean, Alcaraz, you know, he could definitely, you know, he's not going to get as many free points on his serve. You know, in other words, Alcaraz is great. Just think about how many lessons Alcaraz could take from Kyrgios. But Kyrgios there could be a lesson if there was the supermarket of tennis to say, okay, let's go with the very best and say, okay, this would be ideal. His approach patterns, they're one of the reasons to have an underspin backhand is to have an underspin backhand. And he idolized Federer, and Federer, Uncle Tony one time, Tony Rendell said, we can't believe how dumb he's playing. And it's hard to even say that say anything negative about Roger Federer. So Federer, he's running around his backhand in the day. You know, he's retired now, but he's running around his backhand and he's playing into Rafa's lefty forehand. And then Djokovic comes around and his backhand is a machine. Mm-hmm. It's like Gilbert said about Agassi, his backhand is a gift from God. And it wasn't until 2017 that Federer started using analytics. And in our world, analytics, we would say, well, it's overrated, but listen to us. Why we say it's overrated is if you don't know the numbers for grip, swing, and body, well, wait a minute, you're skipping the first several chapters of analytics. And when Roger played, he said the best tennis of his life against Nadal 2017. I heard the story from a friend of Tony Godsick, Roger's agent, that Godsick said, hey, you need to add this, use this, start using analytics. And Roger, who's now a billionaire, said, I think it's too expensive. And Godsick said, I'll pay for it. Then Roger said, well, I don't have all those numbers in my head. And then finally, he started attacking more. He did start going in more, people thought, with, or perhaps people knew. I certainly wasn't doing any charting on that. Was he going in more when he was being coached by Edberg? But when they changed the grass at Wimbledon, and then Roger, if you read about Roger, he has said, I have more confidence in my forehand than I do my volleys. So, here's a guy who, won the gold medal playing doubles with Wawrinka. But coming back to Tsitsipas, his approach shot patterns, it'd be much better if he were to take more underspin backhand approach shots. And then if he knew the math, when he takes it in diagonally, he's taking speed off the ball so he can get closer to the net. The trajectory keeps the ball lower. And then he's giving his opponent less pace. You get about 50% of your pace from your opponent's pace. So I think also directionals. One of these upcoming podcasts, we're going to have Paul Wardlaw. Our listeners should go to YouTube, and there's many clips about Paul Wardlaw tennis directionals. And one thought on that is when the term inside out changed from technique to tactics. In tennis years ago, inside out meant to swing close to away from your body. Well, I think of Jim Courier calling his company inside out. Certainly he was known to run around his backhand, hit his forehand. When Andy Roddick was inducted to the Hall of Fame and Courier was a Hall of Famer sitting behind him, and Andy goes, well, I feel comfortable because I had a crappy backhand, but Jim Courier was sitting behind me and he had a crappy backhand. And, he had a baseball, he had a baseball swing, he had a horizontal swing. Courier had the left hand way underneath on his backhand side. And because of that, he had to pull the arm in, had a horizontal swing. But yet brain memory, obviously he could hit backhands. He became number one in the world. But I think coming back to Tsitsipas, the directionals, many times he does well because he's a pressure player, but many times it's a low percentage play. He's playing aggressive, low percentage when he's ripping the ball up the line. When he does that, what zone of the court is he in? I agree with you that more net appearances. And then I think all tennis players, to clean up their volleys. We mentioned this on a podcast before, and I think we get close coming back to your coach. But Dave Secker, he said about Braden's book, he goes, they don't need to change anything with the book except for the photos. And, the book's not in print anymore. And I can just go through country after country that used to use it as their national training book. But those are a few things with his game. Before we talk about his coach, I think one thing is with Patrick Mortogolu, I think it was great that during the pandemic, they started a foundation. They helped people that weren't ranked in the top 100. So you just think about, I know my son was ranked 200 in the world, and you don't make money at 200 in the world. I think that was very admirable. With, I think one thing to mention while we're talking about how he won the Masters. We've mentioned Stefan Edberg a few times. I like to tell people one year Edberg, he got to the Wimbledon and US Open final, but in the other two, Australia and the French, he lost in the first round. So, Tsitsipas has had some early round, first round losses, but no, I think he's been a consistent top 10 player for a long period of time now. But no, I think one thing is to come back to your coach. I think it's a great story. How your friend had a video made here, and then you started looking at the content, and then you told me that your coach was influenced by Braden, and and then with your upbringing, your years with Tsitsipas. But let's circle back and let's just talk a little bit about to close. You have any questions for me, but also to just close on your childhood coach?
No, I mean, I'm just gonna talk for myself, no one else. My coach, I'll say this: if you would ask, because you asked me what levels I coach. I said all levels. So I primarily coach beginners. If you were to ask most kids today, I do not know. I think they would obviously say, yeah, I like my coach or something like this. I don't know, though, if they would speak or think of him with the same enthusiasm as I did. I knew even as a 15 or 16-year-old that I was very lucky. And I just felt in terms of how to play or what to do on the court, I almost had the blind trust to him. And, that's how I felt. This is me, no one else. But again, I remember not only he taught similar stuff the way it is, on the courses and your guys's, all the material you guys have. But I remember him telling me about how he watched Vic Braden's video cassettes. And then another thing I want to touch upon, I just owe so much to him, is I always felt, I could get his help. He did a lot of stuff pro bono, and that is something that I know maybe it's the way the business is here in the States, but he did so much on his own time for me, whether it was warming me up for a tournament or a match, staying longer for practice, just discussing. I mean, and that's why I think one of the reasons why he had so much success as a coach. If I called him, I remember I would call him from my house phone. If I had sometimes a tough loss, he would always answer the phone and, talk to me. Small things like that. But I knew even sometimes you don't know until you get older. I knew even as a 16-year-old that I was in good hands is an understatement. I don't think he's big on social media or stuff like that. He's a very private person. But if he's listening, I owe him a lot. There's a lot of interesting points thinking back. I'm a tennis coach, but I was not the only one. A lot of his players ended up becoming tennis coaches. I think that tells you something else. He almost developed a following. I think that tells usually if your students become teachers, I think that's a sign you're doing something well. I don't want to do circles, but I was very lucky with who I had. And I don't think it's a coincidence that maybe, Stefanos, one of the reasons he's had so much success is because he had, him at a stage of his life. But this is the way I view it. But
Well, I think it's time for a Ted Lasso quote. Did you watch the series on Ted Lasso called Ted Lasso?
No, I've heard of it. I'm not big on TV series, but I've heard of it. Yes.
Anyway, Ted Lasso. I believe it's be curious, not judgmental. It's great that your coach was curious. A coworker who does all the work behind the scenes with his podcast. It's Andres Barbossa's idea. So Ivan Osirets has his Vic Braden chair set up to the left. And we've told people before, we don't let anybody sit in the chair. And, this sounds like a very bold statement. I think with our mentors and what we've put together, I'm pretty confident that, what we have put together is better than what the USTA in this country or the PTR or the USPTA. And it's really just going backwards. And I think that's where it's great to have you tell the story of your coach and what took place on those courts in Athens. And then obviously the story of Stefanos Tsitsipas. I like what you said, that you knew you were in good hands.
Oh, yes. Yes. I mean, very confident with him. It's, and I don't know, whether the good or high or, beginner or whatever level you want to call yourself. I don't know how people feel. But I remember I was very confident with him, and this is only the way I felt. I'm in this with most things in my life. I mean, soccer, there's a term called the one-man club guy. And I remember, I was going to stay with him no matter what, never change. And to this day, if I had to have a coach, I would choose him.
That's fantastic.
So, but that's another thing, and Stefanos too. I mean, his father was his coach too, but I would say he was kind of the guy who influenced him too. And people didn't, you kind of stay with the same coach at the same club for your as a kid. That's what most people did. And you wouldn't go to other people. And you would basically represent the club and, developed into a relationship with your coach. That's what happened to me. But, you represent the club and, but yes, getting off tangent, but
no, it's all good.
I would say I can't emphasize it, and I haven't seen him in many years, and I doubt he's listening now. But it's this may come off very awkward, but I'm in the teaching environment. My father is a history buff, and I enjoy history as well. And I always think the relationship between student and teacher. We always used to talk about, if you're familiar, Socrates, how his student was Plato, and then his student was Aristotle, and then Aristotle's student was Alexander the Great. Just that idea of the tree line always kept into me. And I don't know.
No, it's well put. The connections. We say coaching tree, and again, I don't want to sound down and out pessimistic, but we need to have young tennis coaches have a coaching tree, that we need to learn from coaches from the past. I think another thing, Japanese society. I was in Japan teaching tennis several times, and I ended up talking to the person in charge, Munehiro Yoshida, his wife Kazuko Swamatsu, world-class tennis player. Anyway, I'm in his office and it's past midnight. I come out of his office and every employee is still there. And I said, why is everybody still here? And the comment was, you don't go home until the boss goes home. And I know many young tennis coaches, and I think what you said about pro bono is young people are at a tennis facility, and hopefully they're at a tennis facility where there's someone who has more experience than them, and they leave the court. Sometimes they leave the facility because they have no lessons. And just because you don't have any lessons, what you should do is just go to the court where the person is teaching and observe. And just, you have to, when you think about greatness, I mean, it's not like, well, I don't have any lessons. I guess I'll leave now. I guess I'll go home. I only have 4 privates today. I only have 6 privates today. But no, certainly, I feel like I know you in person, and that's something that's very positive from the internet experience where we have content. I talk to people on the phone quite often who I've never met in person, and I know that they have listened to the content, and it's not by any means that they know Steve Smith stuff, but it's great that they are studying tennis teachers from the past and learning, and that's really what our game needs. Our game, if we have better coaches, we'll have better players. We have better players, we'll have more players, and especially now with certainly pickleball and padel, we really need a shot in the arm for tennis. Last thing, you have any questions for me?
No, I just want to thank you. I think the pleasure is mine, honestly, and thank you for sharing your passion for teaching. Your entire platform. It's helped me a lot in my teaching, and I'm one of those guys that the cliche, there's no such thing as a self-made man, and I believe that. You've helped me out a lot. We've never met in person, but I just want to thank you, and hopefully you keep this work going on. And I'm a big fan, and that's all I have to say.
No, well, thank you. 9 syllables versus 2. Why don't you just pronounce your name one more time?
So I was going to almost joke around saying I have like 2 middle names. I have 0 middle names, but my name is Constantinos Alevizopoulos.
Say that one last time. I won't ask again.
Constantinos Alevizopoulos.
Wow. I love it. Love it. But thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners got so much out of this, and I knew it would be a fun story. And let's talk soon, and let's get you down here to Virginia.
Of course.
Actually, I told a friend the other day, I said, hey, I want to go check out the Ty Tucker Tennis Center. My son played tennis at Ohio State, and I'm a fan of Ty because he just works his players so hard, and I'd love to see that center one day. But maybe I'll get it to Columbus. But we're set up for you to come and visit here. It's a beautiful place in the mountains in Virginia.
Sorry, last thing. I've seen the new facility. I mean, the old one was beautiful. The new one is amazing too. So you should come and check it out. Yeah.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, Coach.
Appreciate it very much. Good night.
Thank you. Danlika, see you. Thank you.
Bye. Okay, listeners, thank you very much. Podcast 155. Next one will be 156. So we're getting up towards our 3-year total. But I appreciate people listening, and golden nuggets for the tennis treasure chest. Adios, amigos.